Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into how global trade headlines about tariff evasion are surprisingly intersecting with U.S. immigration cues for EB-5 investors. Usually, when we think of international supply chains, we aren't exactly thinking about permanent residency, right? But as we're going to see today, the line between global commerce and personal immigration is getting incredibly blurry. We're going to cut through the noise and figure out what genuinely matters for your immigration petition.
Let's kick things off with a pretty provocative quote from a White House trade advisor to really hook into the macro-level geopolitical issue driving this whole conversation. The accusation here is that exporters are essentially laundering their goods, literally routing them through intermediary economies in places like Latin America and Southeast Asia before they ever hit U.S. shores. It's a heavy claim for sure, and it's this exact sentiment in Washington that's triggering waves of new scrutiny across multiple federal agencies.
So what exactly is the administration calling the Great Transshipment Scam? Basically, transshipment happens when goods originally manufactured in one country are shipped over to a third-party nation. Once they're there, they undergo some really light processing, maybe a bit of repackaging or sometimes just simple relabeling, all so they can be imported into the U.S. under a completely different country of origin. The goal? Securing a lower tariff rate. And it's this specific practice that has sparked a massive regulatory response. All right, here is our roadmap for today. We'll be covering the Great Transshipment Scam, does this affect EB-5, source of funds scrutiny, indirect effects on processing, and finally, protecting your EB-5 petition. Let's jump in.
Section 1. The Great Transshipment Scam.
Now, there is a massive, and I mean massive, discrepancy in the estimated financial scale of this issue. On one side, you've got the White House report citing independent estimates that claim evasion is costing over $300 billion annually. But on the other side, trade economists are pushing back hard on those headline figures, estimating the real number is much closer to $40 billion. That is a huge spread. But honestly, regardless of who actually has the math right here, the narrative has firmly taken root in Washington.
Now, it's absolutely crucial we look at this impartially from all angles. China completely rejects this evasion framing. From their perspective, shifting supply chains to other countries reflects ordinary, perfectly legal business diversification, not fraud or tariff evasion. It's just the natural evolution of global commerce. But here's the key takeaway for us. Regardless of the perspective or the true intent behind these shifting supply chains, U.S. enforcement agencies are putting international capital flows under a microscope.
And they're bringing in the big guns to do it. The administration is planning to deploy AI-driven trade data analysis to scrutinize international shipments and capital flows. They're actively looking for subtle patterns that a human auditor might just miss. And this right here, this acts as the very first ripple heading straight toward the immigration system. When federal agencies upgrade their tech to aggressively trace money and goods, that investigative mindset inevitably bleeds over into how other agencies process international documentation.
Which brings us to Section 2. Does this affect EB-5?
This is the million-dollar question we have to answer for the thousands of Chinese nationals currently navigating the EB-5 program. Think about it. You're an investor, you've gathered your capital, you're ready to create U.S. jobs. You have absolutely nothing to do with federal trade policy. So does a tariff crackdown actually mean anything for your personal I-56E petition?
Well, we have to draw a hard line between direct legal threats and indirect paperwork nightmares. Your direct legal exposure is thankfully very limited because EB-5 eligibility hinges entirely on proving you have lawful, traceable capital and that you're making a qualifying investment. A tariff dispute doesn't rewrite those rules. However, the indirect effects, those are very real. In a climate of heightened federal suspicion, adjudicators are just naturally going to raise the bar for how perfectly you must document your money trail.
Let's dig into that in Section 3, source of funds scrutiny.
Look, long before this tariff report ever came out, Chinese EB-5 applicants were already facing the most rigorous source of funds review of literally any nationality. USCIS meticulously examines business income and the exact methods used for currency conversion under China's strict safe regulations. They also thoroughly check for any employment ties to security flag tech firms. That was all just the baseline, well before any of this current trade tension escalated. But now, we really have to look at the new high-risk profiles. If your investment capital traces back to a business tied to international logistics, import-export, or manufacturing suppliers, brace yourself. Expect your financial history to be reviewed much more closely today than it would have been just a few years ago. Even if your business operates flawlessly, Simply existing in an industry that happens to touch U.S. cross-border trade means your file is going to be scrutinized with a magnifying glass.
Moving right along to Section 4, Indirect Effects on Processing.
So how does this actually ripple out into the real world? Well, if an investor's funds even remotely trace back to a business named in a transshipment investigation, this heightened federal attention almost guarantees processing delays and incredibly complex paperwork requests. But here's the kicker. Even if you aren't named in any investigation, this broader climate of suspicion inherently causes longer overall processing times across the board. Adjudicators take longer, and requests for evidence, or RFEs, pop up way more frequently. It's the hidden cost of a tense trade environment. All right, let's talk solutions in Section 5, Protecting Your EB-5 Petition. How do you actually get out ahead of this? By taking 3 proactive steps. Number 1, keep your financial records perfectly organized. Number 2, document all your major transactions preemptively. Seriously, don't wait for USCIS to ask for the paper trail. Build it before you even file. And number 3, make absolutely sure you're working alongside qualified immigration professionals who know exactly what today's adjudicators are hunting for. Clean documentation upfront saves you from scrambling after an RFE later.
Because let me tell you, USCIS expects a mountain of very specific evidence to prove your funds were lawfully generated. It is not enough to just show you have a lump sum of money sitting in a bank account. You have to prove the entire journey of that money. Whether we're talking tax records, property sales, or detailed international transaction receipts, every single link in the chain, from the moment the capital was earned to the second it hits the U.S. project, has got to be accounted for. And remember, with over 500 USCIS-approved regional centers available across the country, you definitely have options. But choosing the right partner is absolutely vital right now, because frankly, not all of these centers are equipped to navigate this tightening compliance landscape. You need an organization that truly grasps the nuances of the current trade climate and how it directly intersects with your source of funds. So what specific traits should you be demanding from a regional center sponsor, especially if you're investing in a targeted employment area project that inherently draws closer review? Well, you want a sponsor with a bulletproof track record of I-526C approvals. You want completely transparent fund administration that fully aligns with the EB-5 Reform and Integrity Act. And crucially, you want a team with deep, real-world experience guiding Chinese nationals through these exact types of rigorous financial reviews. To wrap up this explainer, I want you to remember this. Trade and immigration policies are just going to keep colliding as technology advances. Proactive preparation is absolutely your best path to a smooth green card approval. The rules of EB-5 haven't fundamentally changed, but that federal magnifying glass has certainly gotten a whole lot stronger. As AI-driven analysis becomes the new global standard, you have to ask yourself, is your documentation truly ready to hold up to the light? Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and we look forward to helping you navigate the complexities of the world around us.